Observer, Minister of Planning, Economic Affairs and Development, Senator the Honourable Swaratsingh. Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening, Mikey, and good evening to your listeners.
Yeah, I'm hearing you a lot better. Good to hear your voice. And let me first of all thank you so much for taking time out on this Sunday to link with us here. And Shubh Diwali to you and your entire community.
Thank you, Shubh Diwali to you and your listeners as well.
Yes. Budget, it's on the minds of many. Some people are still trying to sort of find their way as to what adjustments need to be made and, what actually transpired on that day. And you have to break it down to the lowest common denominator for the average man. Looking at the summary here, and of course the theme was Trinidad and Tobago first, building economic fairness through accountable fiscal policies. Expand on that.
Well, as you know, when the Prime Minister and this government assumed office at the end of April, beginning of May, her intent from the very beginning has always been to try to bring some balance to those who have been significantly disadvantaged over the last 10 years. So her focus has always been to have a people-centered approach to governing. And so she tasked our cluster, the Minister of Finance, myself, and the Minister of Trade, to focus on making sure that we can create policies that are geared towards giving hope to ordinary persons and to everybody by and large, because I don't want to distinguish between categories of persons, but that citizens of Trinidad and Tobago should feel hopeful in the economy, should know that the government care about them when it comes to jobs. And I'm sure you would have spoken to Minister Smith also earlier on, whether it be in jobs or whether it be in finding ways to satisfy the workers' agenda, vis-a-vis giving people an honest wage or better wage or a living wage, as she describes it, or whether it be just creating opportunities for ordinary citizens to participate. And then the Minister of Finance would have talked about a real estate thrust on the stock exchange, but more so is just creating opportunities for persons to feel that they can participate in the economy, to feel that the government is working for them, and to feel that they can fare better as this economic recovery unfolds.
Yeah. I want to look at here tax reforms, the introduction of transfer pricing legislation to secure revenue and curb profit shifting by multinationals, with supporting regulations and officer training. A review of the VAT system is planned with consideration to replace it with a simpler sales tax at the point of final transaction, aimed at improving efficiency and clearing arrears. Yeah, because we've grown accustomed to the VAT, VAT inclusive or VAT added as the case may be. But this, of course, is meant to be a lot simpler, a lot easier.
And a lot simpler to administer as well. And the whole idea is that because, as you know, VAT has to be calculated, it has to be deposited, and there's a delay in VAT hitting the government coffers. And then, of course, we have to calculate as well VAT returns, and a number of things will go into that, both from a manpower perspective as well as from an economic planning perspective. So many countries have moved towards a GST, so that is what is being contemplated, and a general sales tax would be a direct at the point of commercial activity and go directly into the consolidated fund. Now, what also and the Minister of Finance would have spoken about that in his budget.
When could that happen, and how long are we expected to get?
In the last couple of months is retooled the National Information Center and put in a National Payments and Innovation Center, so that we are moving towards having direct payments to government already. So we have started to prefigure some of this, and that's why you would see that, and as you know, I'm sure Minister Smith would have spoken about it many times to you as well, is using technology to simplify the ways in which we can interact with government, to simplify the ways in which we can arrange payments, so that we can, by creating electronic identification, being able to use wallets, being able to use the whole national lotteries, 1,300 stations across the country. So there are different ways in which we can engage the government, make payments, and simplify the type of economic activity. So, for example, contemplated in the past, in the future, if you want to apply for a driver's permit, a passport, a transfer certificate, you can do all of those things through the payment center. So that's one of the reasons why this government is moving at a pace to make sure and modernize in the ways in which we collect revenue, collect taxes, organize payments, so that people can be comfortable and in a secure way of engaging with government.
Okay, so that makes it okay. Social support. A reduction in the price of super gasoline by $1 per liter at the pump, of course, was announced as a measure to build economic fairness.
Yes.
Does.
But it's also to give some measure of disposable income that people will retain in their pockets. It's important that, especially a significant sector of our population, especially those who use super as opposed to those who may use premium gas, right, that we give some measure of relief. And again, these are not new things. This should have been done some time ago. There is an opportunity to pass back some of that to consumers. So that's one of the reasons why I think the Minister of Finance would have spoken in those terms, and the Prime Minister would have characterized not only this budget, but her administration as one that is focused on giving people, being people-centered and giving people additional benefits so that they can have something tangible in their economic activity, and of course to make them be more, to benefit more from having some additional disposable income in their accounts.
International standing. Trinidad and Tobago is on course to be removed from the EU's list of non-cooperative jurisdictions by February of next year, which is expected to lower borrowing costs, strengthen capital markets, and unlock opportunities for international cooperation.
Yeah, now those are very, very important things. As you know, we operate in a global space, so it's quite important for us, based on not only our international standings, but also in terms of being able to access not just loans but even financing mechanisms through the World Bank, the IDB, the European Union, and other agencies. It's important that we stay on the right side of those engagements. Now, as you know, we have an audit coming up in March of next year. So all those factor regulation amendments that we would have passed in the last month or so, we are going to be one of the first countries in the Caribbean to have that audit coming up. Now, there are lots of work to be done. We still have a number of hurdles to cross, but we are very well on track, and I think that's one of the pluses that we would have undertaken in the last month or so, especially through the Attorney General's office.
All right. The energy sector outlook. Natural gas production and projected to recover from 2.6 billion cubic feet per day to 3.2 billion cubic feet by 2027, led by projects such as the Manatee and Dragon gas fields. And oil production is expected to benefit from enhanced exploration and field development, with strong foreign investment flows projected into the upstream energy sector.
Well, as you know, the energy sector continues to be, the hydrocarbon sector continues to be the mainstay of our economy, irrespective of how we will slice and dice it. And those things have taken, as you would have seen in the recent past, Exxon and other interested persons coming in and being able to start significant activity. BP, Shell, and the others are continuing their activities as well. So we would see a much brighter future. Now, the thing is, and this is what I think the Minister of Finance would have discussed, and the Prime Minister, of course, would have cautioned us, is that some of those projects will see increased activity as we go along 2027, 28, and in the 30s, 30, 32, 33, and of course 37 and 30, 36 and 37 as we go forward in our country's trajectory. And even as we invest in diversification as well in the tourism sector, that you will see an immediate uplift from hopefully a beginning of construction activity. All of those may not start to contribute revenues until the next 2 to 3 to 4 years. So she's asked us as well to focus on the non-energy sector, where we need to increase that the contribution of the non-energy sector to GDP and to economic activity. And at the same time, what she has asked us to do as well is to make sure and bring the private sector in as partners in driving economic growth and activity. So, while we have, and I think this is an excellent budget, and we would have done a tremendous job, and again, thanks to all those in finance and planning and all across the public service who would have helped to make this happen. Let's be very clear. We're still going to have challenges moving forward. We all have to work together. We need the private sector to be part of this economic activity and this drive towards continuing to build and establish economic growth, create fiscal space, and create economic activity within our drive to revitalize the economy. We have to also implement on the projects that we have before us. So our focus, the energy sector or the hydrocarbon sector, is taking and will take a life of its own. We have to put additional efforts in the non-hydrocarbon sector to make sure that we can get that taken over as well.
Yeah. Now, we hear a lot of talk about this, as far as for landlords and property surcharge, where many people are saying like low income and pensioners are going to face the prospect of higher rents as the landlord pass on these added costs. And this was said, of course, by the finance minister that from effective January 1st of next year, a 2.5% surcharge will apply to landlords earning up to $20,000 in annual rental income, while those earning above that threshold will be taxed at 3.5%. So all landlords must register with the Board of Inland Revenue and pay a one-time registration fee of $2,500, which is expected to rake in a minimum of $70 million in revenue. And of course, when the Prime Minister was asked about this being passed on to tenants, she said, while fears have been expressed that landlords will pass on the tax to tenants by increasing their rents, Prime Minister said tenants have the option to move out.
But I think together with that, and I think two things. One is that we have to start. There has been a lot of groups in our society, gambling legislation also attacks some of those groups as well. But there have been groups in our society that have been making a lot of income. So this is a tax on income that they would have received by using their properties and other spaces. And the two things that I think the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance have alluded to in their discussion. One is that we have to get people to pull their weight. Everybody has to pull their weight, given the economic circumstances we find ourselves in. Two is that income should have been declared and taxed in any event, because it's an income that has been derived from economic activity. And three, that while I think there is an assumption is this and in other measures that people will pass on that to consumers, I think we also have to develop a more discerning consumer and to report instances where this has been unfairly applied. We do have mechanisms to address that. I think when it comes to the banking sector and other sectors, we have to become a society that must not just simply accept some of these things as fait accompli, but also begin to become more enlightened and educated on our consumer rights and the ways in which we can access mechanisms, whether it be to the Ombudsman and other places, to access mechanisms to say to some of these people, no, that. it's not only patently unfair sometimes. I think it is also onerous and burdensome to be able to put that on persons who are unable, because remember, this is income that people would have already enjoyed. So I would like to see a greater enhancement in our awareness of consumers.
No, I agree with you. I mean, rather than having every house tax, whatever properties that are generating revenue, it's only fair that you pay something.
Yes. And it's a small amount, huh?
Yeah, when you look at it, yes, it is. And that's where it gets confusing, because here you have this situation where why should the tenants be affected with it? I mean, you are generating money, you are generating revenue, so it's only fair that you pay something, rather than to have an administration force you into getting into something, having to evaluate it and come up with their own figure and say this is what we expect to get. And it really makes you wonder sometimes if you're able to work with people, or they just simply love to complain.
Yeah, but I think on the other side of that too, I am also, and I've heard it across the board in a number of fora that we would have spoken in post-budget, that there is this expectation that people automatically will pass on some of these things to consumers. You see it when it comes to bank fees and charges. You see it when it comes to other consumer other consumer activities and so on, that I think there is this constant expectation, and we have to say that I'm not going to, if it is, for example, that I go somewhere and the prices change astronomically, simply find somewhere else to go to, or simply say, what, I will not patronize this, or I will not do that. And I think we have to be sufficiently aware, and the Minister of Finance made the point. In this day of social media, there are so many alternatives that are available to us. We must not find ourselves in a situation where we are powerless. And so when I listen to people talk, I hear a sense of powerlessness, that this was happened to me. Well, even if it happens, I think we have to be able to say, you know what, I am not going to accept it. And there are reporting mechanisms to deal with some of these things, and we need to avail ourselves of it.
Yeah, I want to look at the NIB as well, and I'm sure you've been bombarded with a lot of talk where this is concerned. Even economist Professor Patrick Watson, he weighed in on it. He described the near bankruptcy of funds in the National Insurance Board as being messy. And I wonder if people understand that, it's a matter of more money that needs to be put aside for you so you can get it as far as when the time arrives. Because we're not guaranteed by 2034 that this program may even exist.
Well, the sad fact about it, and this is fact, is that the former governments have been speaking about this since 2019.
Right.
This actual report actually is an old actual report. This is not a new actual report. It's an old actual report that spoke to an intervention that should have taken place minimum 5-6 years ago. Right? So let's be clear. This intervention was geared towards extending the fund into late 2040s. Now, nothing was done. Nothing was done, and again, I have to commend the courage of the Prime Minister, the courage of the Minister of Finance, and the courage of my cabinet colleagues to yet again take an intervention that require a hard decision. Now, there are two things in that. One is that there is an increase in the contribution. Now, what the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance has put into the budget is to make the contribution to do part this fiscal and the second part the next fiscal, so that it's not all done at one time. But the other side of that is, given the fact that we have an aging population, so for example, if we did nothing at all, not only would have the fund been defunct by 2023, but we would have had to find an additional 2 billion annually, and it would grow exponentially, 2.7 and over 3 billion in the following years. That is the shortfall that the fund experienced last fiscal and would have experienced this fiscal if we did not do anything. So not only will the fund run out of money, we will be struggling to meet the fund's obligations and having to serve an increasingly expanding aging population. So hence the reason why we needed to address not just the contribution, but also we also had to address the retirement age, because people are living longer and are more productive. So Barbados, for example, Barbados' retirement age now is 67, and they're contemplating moving it to 70, because they have the same issues that the fund with Barbados. We are taking the decision, through the guidance of the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, taking the decision to move the fund over from 60 to 65 over 10 years, so that now persons will retire, mandatory retirement to be 61 in 2028, and that's because we didn't want anybody who is planning to be retired now to face any unfair disadvantages. So, and again, I think my colleagues would have made the point that all of this is voluntary. So, so we had to make an intervention. The TNN did nothing. They had this report, and Brian Manning would have spoken in Parliament about it a couple of years ago, and still did nothing. They were warned time and time again. Yet, it fell on this caring administration, on this Prime Minister and this Minister of Finance to make the courageous decision to do something about it decisively.
And that's why it was important for me to have you on this evening, as well as the other guests, because I mean, when you look at the information that's coming out from the opposition, it was all about alcohol. It was all about name calling and pointing. I really and truly, the takeaway from Friday's presentation or Friday's by the opposition leader really and truly didn't highlight anything whatsoever. Looking at it now and getting a different perspective, it must have been very, very challenging, and it would have taken a lot of courage by the Honourable Prime Minister and the entire team to say, let's do this. Let's grab the bull by the horns. Let's deal with this once and for all. Because when you look at tax reform, say, listen, we had to find a better way to, get these tax dollars in. It has to be simple, and it shouldn't be confusing to the citizenry. 2, social support. A reduction in the price of super gasoline. I mean, you hear the other side saying, well, all right, but they didn't do it. They were there for 9.5 years. They didn't do it. International standing. I mean, you telling me that we can finally remove that global black eye and go and see how best we can get loans and money that we need for this country. That's important. And that is why communication is so essential. Because speaking to you this evening and looking at this entire layout, looking at the energy sector outlook, looking at the fact that, when people talk about passing on this expenses to tenants, that's totally unfair. This is money that you earn. This is money that you have. You are generating revenue. You have to pay. You have to. Otherwise, you're breaking the law. And that basically tells you quite a lot. And it brings me back to my question. I mean, it took a lot of courage. It had to be challenging. I mean...
but there's one thing that I am disappointed that the leader of the opposition didn't raise. Because I found it it was part of the records of the last Parliament. I found a brief on it when I took over planning. I know it's part of social development brief, initially people's brief as well, and that is women's health. And it's really a tragedy that the leader of the opposition didn't allude to it. We have, and I think Trinidad and Tobago should be justifiably proud that we have 3 females at the head of our countries in leadership in our country at this time. And this Prime Minister took a very bold decision to include a period policy and to make sure and include something that will address women's health. And I think that is so, so important. I mean, this budget addresses a number of things, as you alluded to, all the international things as well, but also the environment and also women's health. And this is probably one of the, I think, well, I mean, I wasn't here for a long time, but this is one of the few budgets that looks at the entire tapestry of how people ought to be given a new lease and participate in economic engagement, but also never forgetting some of our fundamental things that we have to commit to. And women's health is one of them. And that period policy that will destigmatize women's women's cycle and what women go through, and make sure that we provide proper support for girls and young women as they come into full adulthood. So that's something that I'm really, really happy about in the budget as well. And it's a pity that too was not highlighted.
And you're right. I agree with you. And again, I want to say hats off to you and the entire team at the Ministry of Finance, the Office of the Prime Minister, the Honourable Prime Minister, and everyone who really and truly sat down and went through this. And of course, we've seen photographs of where the entire cabinet had sessions where you were talking about it. It really says a lot. And I think really that we are on the good path. We are on a very good, bright path. And it really makes you wonder, why is it that, you know, for the last 9.5 years, none of these decisions were people-centered?
Yeah, I mean, but I think more importantly, you know, the fact is that you know, the sad reality is that the country has been stagnant for far too long.
Yeah.
And in fact, and as you know, things that are standing still are in fact moving backward because of the pace at which the world has been evolving. And so when you look around, you know, everything is urgent. Institutions to fix, jobs to be filled. I mean, you talk about vacancies in customs and VIR and across the public sector. Teachers that have not been confirmed, schools that have been neglected, about 20-something schools and community centers, 93 schools that have been completed, the Baby Campus, the Cuba Hospital. When you look around the public services and you look across the country, but buildings have not been maintained, roads that still need to be rehabilitated, traffic congestion, and you look around, I mean, we have real issues to be solved, and this budget signals the fact that there is a Prime Minister and a cabinet prepared to make the hard decisions.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you so much for taking time out and linking with us this evening. It has been very insightful, and I know that you're up to the challenge. Keep up the good work, and we will be checking in with you, of course, as time goes along.
Thank you, Mikey. And again, Shub Diwali to you and your listeners.
Thank you so much. Shub Diwali.
The Observer.